Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another incredible guest. I love speaking with people all over the world. I specifically love the Southern accent. So it's just going to be an hour of serenading my beautiful ears with a nice, deep, low, raw Southern draw, which is good. So this gentleman, his name is Trey Williams. Now you might have been thinking, how is that Trey? Because it doesn't spell Trey, it spells T-R-A. But it's Trey Williams. Okay, I pronounced it wrong. I'm glad he put in pronunciation key and shared with me that. But he's a nationally recognized expert in entrepreneurship and business strategy. And the one thing that scares him, horrifies him the most, is that there's so many people who have decided against entrepreneurship in America. And America was really built off of entrepreneurship. So his goal, his mission, his crusade is to rescue 1 million entrepreneurs who are currently suffering in the corporate America system, employment, but really want to be entrepreneurs, but aren't sure how or are too scared to make the jump. So he's created a book called Boss Brain, which reveals a scientifically proven system that unlocks the readers or the entrepreneur's true potential and unleashes their entrepreneurial instincts so they can leave their traditional employment and really realize the American dream for themselves. Because that's what this is about. It's what I love about it. And what I love about it is how well this is going to fit in the message of legacy. And I want you to think about that. You have these gifts. What are those gifts? How do we turn those into strengths, market them, and leave a legacy of this? So thank you so much, Trey, for being here. I'm excited to hear more of your story and share that with the Fuel Your Legacy audience.
I'm excited to be here. I mentioned the word legacy in the third paragraph, coincidentally, of the book. So right out of the gate, you and I are aligned on really what our mission is and what we're attempting to do. And so much of entrepreneurship and the inspiration for it is about that legacy. And it's always great to spend time with like-minded people.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and share with us your story and what was it? When did you first recognize, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur? What was that first inclination? How long did it take you from the first inclination to actually doing it? And why are you so passionate about helping other people now?
So I grew up, if you can't tell by the accent, in a small rural area in extreme southern Georgia, and not far from the Florida line. It has the dubious honor of being as far as you can get from an interstate in the state of Georgia. It's more than an hour in any direction to get to an interstate in where I grew up. And I didn't even grow up in the town. I grew up 10 miles outside of the town. So I grew up 10 miles from a red light. And out there, everything is largely agricultural or industrial in some way. But there is no low-hanging fruit in that area. There is no easy opportunity. There is no base of Maslow's hierarchy that's just handled for you. So in a way, out there that looks devoid of opportunity is an environment that nurtures entrepreneurship because it forces you to create opportunity. It forces you to recognize when you have a chance to take action today and alter your destiny and alter your future, because no one is there to hand it to you. And there's no opportunities to just live safely and find something that makes you comfortable. So I really think my journey to entrepreneurship began as a boy on a farm in the middle of nowhere. I know that sounds crazy, but I really do think that that's where it instilled those values. So as I got older, I realized I was never a particularly good employee. And that was mostly because I was extraordinarily optimistic, and I did not necessarily enjoy things that were monotonous and routine. So as you might imagine, I went to college and found myself in a monotonous routine after that, right? Waking up at the crack of dawn, fighting traffic to get to a job that did not fulfill me, spending my days under fluorescent light and leaving just in time to fight traffic again and be able to run a couple of errands before going to sleep and getting up and doing it all over again. It was like Groundhog Day, and over and over and over. And it really struck me right out of graduate school that what I thought that I had been chasing this whole time really didn't resonate with who I was. And later I realized it didn't even resonate with what I was. And the book, we explore the difference between what and who, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But ultimately, I landed in an industry filled with entrepreneurs in the franchise industry, and was lucky enough to sit at the helm of a couple of international brands. And it's fun to be in the franchise industry because everyone you talk to is an entrepreneur. Every single person is a business owner. Every person has that glass half full mentality. And it's no wonder that I landed there, quite honestly, and spent a decade or so really enjoying being in that environment and about those who refuse to think that there's not a solution to every problem. And for those who felt the same way about the monotony that I felt. And after the time in the franchise industry for, 8-9 years, I began to notice some patterns. And there was consistently this sort of internal tug of war with everyone who we talked to that was considering owning their own business, but had yet to take the leap. And it happened so consistently that I started taking notes on it. I started researching the science behind some of these sort of mental pitfalls that we all fall into and some of the biases. And it really became the formula for the book. So what I uncovered during my time in that industry, and what I then subsequently decided to leave that, become an entrepreneur, write this book myself, was there's a very ancient battle going on in our brains that we won eons ago. And it's really the battle between our hardwired optimism and our preference for certainty. And we have both of those in our brains, but both of those are at odds with one another. You can be optimistic, but that optimism is in direct conflict with your need for certainty. Now, this was really, really important 10,000 years ago, when Mother Nature was trying to prevent every single person from jumping on a boat and sailing beyond the horizon when they didn't know what was on the other side of the horizon. So there was a little bit of a balancing act for us as a species, where some folks were a little more risk averse than others, but that allowed us to sort of expand in a contiguous way. But today, when that base of Maslow's hierarchy is taken care of, one of those two variables is conquering the other, and it is that need for certainty. In America specifically, even those that are at the lowest end of the economic spectrum earn more than half of the world's population. The poverty level in America is 12,000. The median income on this planet is 10,000. So the poorest people in America still make more than half of the world's population. And what that translates to is we have an enormous amount of certainty. And we don't want to let go of that certainty, even though we feel that inherent optimism in our brains that we've always had. And this is the crux of the book. And this is why there's been a direct relationship between the rise of the middle class and decline of American entrepreneurship. The more certain comfort becomes, the less likely we are to take risks. And entrepreneurship in America has declined virtually every year since the mid-1940s. And while we are supposedly the most entrepreneurial country in the world, the truth is we're dead last among major industrialized countries. So about 70% of America wishes they were self-employed. Less than 7% actually is. I'm going to put that into perspective for you that I think most folks who follow international economic policy can understand. So democratic socialist leaning Norway has a higher percentage of entrepreneurs than America. Dictatorial leaning Russia has a higher percentage of entrepreneurs than America. China, being communist, has almost 9 times the percentage of entrepreneurs as America. And we talk a lot about this American entrepreneurial spirit, and the spirit is still there. We rank 3rd in the world behind Portugal and Poland as a percentage of people who wish they were self-employed. but we are approaching dead last on the planet and are already among the lowest of the major industrialized nations. Here's the sad statistic, and I'll get off my soapbox here. By the mid 2040s, 99% of Americans will work for the other 1%. Really a staggering statistic. And most people don't believe me when I say it, and I have to take them to the National Bureau of Labor and Statistics website and prove all of these things because it's so counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm curious, and before we jump back, I want to see how do you define entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur? Because the way I would say it, I guess you could say being self-employed, but I think that anybody who really knows much of anything from a business perspective, they don't want to be self-employed. Being self-employed sucks, but it is the worst. So you're still trading time for money, but instead of having one boss, you exchanged for a lot of bosses, all of your clients. Like being self-employed is terrible, in my opinion. Like it's just not something that somebody really wants. They think they want it because they don't like their boss. But then when they become self-employed and they realize, well, I used to have one boss I had to please. Now I got to please 1,000 bosses. This sucks, right? So I wouldn't consider somebody who's self-employed necessarily an entrepreneur. I would consider them self-employed with they maybe want to become an entrepreneur, but they really don't know what they're doing. And so they're self-employed. That's how I would define it. But I'm curious what your definition of entrepreneur is or entrepreneurship, just so we can make sure we're having the same conversation.
Yeah, the way the National Bureau of Labor and Statistics defines it is by self-employment. So I don't know what an entrepreneur is if a self-employed person isn't an entrepreneur. And I think just because you buy into a system that has been created by someone else or into an industry that is a trade school or someone, you go an apprenticeship for 4 years and become an electrician and you own your own company, that person owns their own company. They answer to no one else. They don't get issued a W-2. They're the ones who make the decisions every morning about how that company is driven, how it has grown. So I would disagree that a self-employed person isn't an entrepreneur because I don't know that you have to have a new idea or you have to have some innovation or some patent that defines you as being a startup. I really think it's a person who has made the decision that their life's not going to be dictated by someone else. They're not going to climb a ladder that someone else built.
Okay. So let's assume that that's the definition. Then where would, like, again, from a business owner perspective, because I guess maybe there's a difference between an entrepreneur or business owner, or entrepreneur is the umbrella and business owner and self-employed fit in there. But when I think of somebody who's self-employed, they don't own a business, they own a job. And when somebody owns a business, that they can remove themselves from that business, much like a franchise. Like if you're a good franchise owner, you don't have to show up to work every day. You own a franchise, you've got managers, you've got people who work for you, and you get a paycheck regardless. And unless I'm way off base, that's why I'm asking.
No. You and I are saying the same thing
for the listener, because I think this is huge. If somebody thinks, oh, I want to go be an entrepreneur, I'm going to go sell boondoggle on the street, and nobody defines my future, but they're struggling, they can't feed themselves, go get a job. Like, don't starve because you want to be an entrepreneur. And on the same token, you can be a successful entrepreneur, but I feel like it's different than just being self-employed. So that's why I want to
you and I are saying the same thing. The only difference between what you're defining as self-employed and what I would say is still an entrepreneur is that those folks are finding a level of comfort in their role that doesn't require them to grow that business to the point that they can remove themselves from. There's not a single person who owns the business, who puts management in place and removes themselves from that day-to-day operations and tries to grow it at a strategic level, who did not at the first day when they start take an active role every day where they were in a job. So they were at that point at some point. They just did not get comfortable at that point, and they continued to grow it so they could remove themselves from it. And you know, the hierarchy of where our comfort lies is an entirely different discussion, and one that probably Freud and a lot of other psychologists would love to participate in.
Sure.
But the point is, we all have varying levels where we say this is enough, right? Maybe those guys never hit the hedonic treadmill, and they never had that thirst. What they really wanted was the freedom to be able to make a decision to stop and go to their daughter's soccer game at 3:00 in the afternoon one day. while they still might be actively involved in the day-to-day and they have what you would call, they just have a job. If they decide they want to go to the soccer game, they go to the soccer game, and they can prioritize things even though they're still actively involved.
Okay. No, that's fair. I just think that I wanted to have that clarity, because I think the clarity is where a lot of people get lost. Like, well, I think I'm an entrepreneur. Am I an entrepreneur? And I think you talked about it really good in your beginning part of this, the idea of certainty versus uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And at some point at some point those equal each other out. And that's, if you listen to like Ed Mylett or some of like Tony Robbins, there's a point at which you could almost say your will to win is bought, but it's not necessarily your will to win. There's a point at which that equalizes, where your certainty reaches, like your certainty and your uncertainty reach a level at which you're happy with, and then there's no need to throw that out of.
Absolutely.
Out of whack. Once it reaches the level you want, it's good.
Yeah, in the book I call that the Goldilocks zone, and that's really dependent on the expanding middle class. So the Goldilocks zone is where you've reached a level of comfort where you are okay inviting a little risk here and there because you're comfortable enough to say, I can take a little risk here and there, and measured risks, but your comfort is not so certain that you're completely averse to change. So let me give you a good example of this. You're 20% more likely to be self-employed if you have a GED in America than if you have a master's degree. And that's because folks with a master's degree have a tremendous amount of certainty. They have job opportunities, they get good pay, they get good benefits, they get retirement, they get all of those things, and certainty just beats the heck out of optimism in that case. But if you aren't afforded those opportunities, then your optimism has to overcome your need for certainty. Otherwise, you're just going to toil away in misery the rest of your life in a job that you hate, and never reach a point where you actually have a legacy. You don't reach financial security. You don't have all those things that the person with a master's degree has. So we succumb to this battle, this ancient battle in our brains, and everybody has a different level of where they stop. And that's okay. But there are plenty of folks out there who would be comfortable just being self-employed because they take pride in the job that they do. Perhaps let's just say someone was an electrician and their father was an electrician, and they just pick up the family business and become an electrician, and they still work that every day. That guy's still an entrepreneur in the eyes of the National Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay.
So I love controversial things. So my playing the devil's advocate is not because we're on different sides on the coin, but just
I know. I love talking about it. I love talking about
it. So question, because I studied neuropsychology. You've done at least enough studying to like understand humans. Do you think that somebody who has an MBA, who's gone through school, that certainty, do you think that's more of a symptom or a cause? I would say that, again, I'm coming from a perspective. I've got a GED. I've got an associate's degree in my schooling, and I've got licenses, and basically I went into a trade. And the reason for that is because at a young age, I didn't I couldn't sit there and go through the monotony of school. There's some people who they are really comfortable with the monotony of school, and that's why they end up, I know people who have 3 and 4 PhD degrees just because they're like perpetual, never ending.
They just love it. Yeah, they absolutely.
They make, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, and they just love being a student, and that's fine, right? But they love the student, so they're a professional student is what I would call them, and that's fine. But they almost love that monotony and the idea of risk or change. It was never comfortable to them. It's not like they got their master's degree and now they have a level of certainty and so they aren't an entrepreneur. It's like they never liked uncertainty. They didn't get trained and got a master's degree and then decided they didn't like uncertainty. They never liked uncertainty. And so it's more of the fact that these people with master's degrees are more likely to be a W-2 employee of some sort is not necessarily caused by the fact that they have a master's degree. It's like they had decided that younger, in my opinion, and that's just my.
No. You're saying this correctly. So imagine the ancestors of those folks, and imagine the ancestors of someone who does not want to be a W-2 employee, wants to be an entrepreneur. So remember when I first said this was critical to our development as a society, that some folks stay on the shores while others get on a boat and sail beyond the horizon, right? We can't let everybody on the boat because then we all might end up dead. So there always have been folks who are a little more risk averse and appreciate that certainty more. We all have that struggle at varying levels. The study that the book is based on just revealed that 70% of Americans still feel like they would prefer to be self-employed. So the freedom and the liberty that we're all afforded by the Constitution is something that's very attractive to those whose optimism beats out the need for certainty. And if you're looking for certainty, you don't necessarily have to come to America because it's not the land of certainty, it's the land of opportunity.
Right.
So that's why American has such a high percentage of those people who actually prefer self-employment. But prior to the mid-1940s, we're talking about 20, 25, almost 30% of the population being entrepreneurs. Today, that's about 6.5%. And this isn't a metric of economics because business closings as a percentage have stayed largely flat. Over a period of time as a percentage, it's almost in flat. It's the number of startups that have significantly dropped over time. Every year, fewer and fewer people start businesses.
So again, all the things you're not supposed to talk about: finances, politics, religion.
Right. I love it.
Let's just open up the can of worms. Do you think that again? I'm not as well versed in the early 1900s, I guess, 1900 to 1940. I'm not as well versed in that time period as far as immigration goes. But now I feel like immigration is very curtailed to only allowing people in if they're sponsored as an employee. Like I try and hire people all the time. They're like, I can't work with you because you're a 1099. When I say hire, I mean partner with people to help them start their own business. And I can't, my visa doesn't allow me to be an entrepreneur. My visa only allows me to have a sponsor company allowing me to work for them. And so do you think that has, yes, we're still having immigration, but the type of people who are coming are not necessarily, not that they don't want to be entrepreneurs. I think their desire's there, but they're almost bound legally to be an employee.
So
into your research, I don't know.
So I can tell you exactly because I have the statistics in the book. Immigrants in America have always been entrepreneurs at a higher percentage than native-born Americans. Full stop. Always been higher since this began being measured during the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s. So at the times when the middle class began to emerge in the 1940s, immigrants were still entrepreneurs, self-employed at a rate almost double in the 30 percentile range of those who were native born. And even today, immigrants who come to this country are more likely to be entrepreneurs than they are to be an employee. And this goes back to what I said about America's freedoms and liberty attract people who have that desire to come to the land of opportunity, not the land of certainty. But simultaneously, native-born Americans are opening fewer and fewer businesses because they're born into certainty. We're raised with the base of Maslow's hierarchy handled. So as a result, we are much more risk averse, whereas those who haven't been raised in that, clothed in that liberty that we all have, yearn for it. And they want to come here and live that American dream. And I talk about the American dream. It's both in the subtitle and it's in the book throughout. Home ownership is not the American dream. This was a lie perpetuated by REITs and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac since the early 1950s. The American dream was defined by James Truslow Adams in 1931 in his book, Epic of America. And it is about obtaining all that is within your innate ability and your God-given talents. And it's having the liberty and the freedom to achieve those things and not being constrained by any outside force, what they called what the Constitution says as any determination of our will, right? We're not told what we have to do. But what happens today is we're told you're supposed to go to school, you're supposed to get a job, you're supposed to buy a house and get married and have kids, right? That's the blueprint for American mediocrity. So you go to school, you get a job, you buy a house, you change yourself to a 30-year mortgage. Now you can't leave that job because you're like, I got a mortgage to pay. I need the certainty of this paycheck 26 times a year. So in the struggle between optimism and the need for certainty, which one do you think becomes dominant when you're chained to a 30-year mortgage, especially when you have mouths to feed? So this story that we're being told in America is, oh, you need to go to school and then you can follow your dreams, is like saying all roads lead to Rome, right? It's like saying it's the opposite of that, in fact. So what I'm saying is one road can't lead to every destination. Right. And it may have done that 2,000 years ago, but today, how could you expect to be an entrepreneur if you follow the same path that every person who becomes an employee follows?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious about this, again, this immigration thing in relation to the conversation around becoming entrepreneurs and certainty. Do you think that immigrants even, I know what my personal belief is, okay, and I'll share that after you answer this question. But and this is not my belief about what I'm asking, but my personal belief about life, my philosophy about life. But do you believe that people, because we're raised in certainty and then we're asked to go out to uncertainty. Do you think that people who are immigrating to America, do you think they actually believe in certainty? Do you actually think that, like, when they're coming here, do they actually believe that there is a certain future for them? Or are they just like, certainty, that bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy, it just doesn't even exist. And so my only objective is to thrive in uncertainty. Like, what do you think their actual underlying philosophy is?
So the book outlines 4 instincts that are hardwired into our brains. They're really entrepreneurial instincts. It's what spread us all around the globe and allowed us to have this ridiculous ascent that we've had in the past few hundred years. And one of those factors is belief. And belief is the foundation of really everything. You don't take an action unless you believe that it's going to result in something. And one of the components of belief is self-efficacy. So what studies have found is that countries that have a lower GDP, that have a lower quality of life, lower standards of living, have folks that are not attracted to entrepreneurship. They're pushed into it. They don't have other options. They don't have jobs that they can go to. So they're forced to say, well, I'm a pretty good potter, or I'm a pretty good blacksmith, or I'm a pretty good farmer. Let me just go do that. Now let's figure out how to make some money. And at the end of it, they believe in their own ability to take action today and affect their future. So when they're coming to America, they're not coming here expecting certainty. They're coming for the land of opportunity. They're saying, just give me a chance and I will show you what I'm capable of. And that's the whole reason they come here. They could stay where they are and get a job and get some relative certainty with 26 paychecks a year or so at some level. And it may not be as comfortable as it is in America, but it would be certain. But I think ultimately their self-efficacy is driven both genetically and by the circumstances and the environment that they find themselves in. These days, every show on television about business startups is about businesses that fail. Name one business show on television that is about someone who started their business, is kicking butt and taking names. There isn't one. From Hell's Kitchen to Bar Rescue, every one of these things is about, oh, here's an entrepreneur that went out and tried it and they're failing miserably and we have to send an expert in to fix the problem. And I despise that that's what the narrative that's being perpetuated, because what we're telling Americans is, don't go do this. Don't go do this. You're going to fail. When the truth is, 60% of the jobs in America, actually closer to 70% of the jobs in America, are by small businesses with less than 20 employees. So our country's built on small business, and you're telling me on television every day that it's impossible and that you're going to fail. And I'm sick of that narrative. One day maybe I can have a television show to show people what's possible, right? And that this is really what America was built on. We were shaped by entrepreneurship. Every city in America was once a trade area where entrepreneurs met somewhere and traded furs or traded gold or traded goods. And that's how this country was built.
Yeah, and I think it's less about that, the fact that they're going to fail, and more about the fact that, or the implication that once you fail once, you're done and you can't try again. Because I think just in that same token, every successful business that is kicking butt and taking names right now, they failed 3 or 4 times. Like
100%. I failed in the past and I went back and got a job, and then I had another idea and I tried it again. You know, that's the beauty of America, is you have that opportunity to say, all right, well, that didn't go well, but I'm going to learn those lessons. I'm going to take them forward. I'll get a little certainty out of a job in the interim. and then I'll start again. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship is you're never really defeated until you stop trying.
Yeah, I think that's what needs to be perpetuated more in those shows. It's not that, go out and it's scary and you're going to fail. Look, we're all going to fail. And rather than being scary, it should be, hey, look, what the show, again, now for you and I, we're going to create our own TV show.
Right.
We're going to go and find out, hey, what failures did you have? And the focus of the show is, how did you maneuver around the failure to ultimately create success? Let's call
it fail forward.
Yeah, fail forward. I love it. That would be awesome. Undercover Boss was pretty good because it was like, hey, here's where I'm failing as a leader. Right. You go in, you find out where your miscommunications are, where you're failing, and then you've got to step up and take accountability at the end of the show and say, this is what we're doing. We're implementing 100%. New policies because that didn't work, right? So I think that's awesome. To answer what I believe, I personally, the only thing I'm certain of in my life is that there's uncertainty and I can't control it. I don't care how, I've met too many people who have been multimillionaires and become dead broke, bankrupt, because one business decision and then they rebuild it, right? So no matter how much money you have, there's no certainty. No matter how much, the coronavirus was a fantastic example of no matter how good of a job you have, you could be laid off tomorrow.
100%. I think it taught a lot of people a lesson who felt like they had certainty in their lives.
Yeah. The only certainty you have is, as he said, your ability, confidence in your ability to create, and you just need a shot to go find out how you can do that. And it's going to be different for everybody. That's what I love is like, sometimes people are like, well, do you just want a bunch of people to do what you're doing? Not necessarily. Like, I love what I'm doing, but go do something you love. And that's what's important. Like, you don't need to become a mini Trey or a mini Sam. Go do something you love, and we can make that happen for you. And we can teach you how to be successful as a business coach. We can teach you how to be successful at whatever it is you love.
Yeah,
because we know
absolutely.
The principles of business that create success, and we know what creates failure. And you get to choose, what do you want to create in your life?
Yeah, so much of the values of entrepreneurship have been distorted by materialism and ambition. And I address this in the book quite a bit. Being ambitious, there are things, goals that you set for yourself. And those are something you can measure in retrospect. You can look back and say, I achieved X, Y, and Z. And those are things that you wanted to do for yourselves. But to me personally, and your podcast name, Fuel Your Legacy, you may have a different definition, but I don't think ambition and legacy are the same thing. Because I think ambition is what you do for yourself, and I think legacy is what you do for other people. And ultimately, no one is going to look back and say, hey, he won this award. He was Salesman of the Year 3 times in a row, et cetera, et cetera. What they're going to look back on is how you affected the lives of those around you, especially after you're gone. That is a legacy. And I think that's what drives entrepreneurs, because you're not going to be able to have that broad effect and make society better and make people better and make things more harmonious by climbing the ladder that someone else built. You're just filling in a cog in the wheel at that point. So if you really want to leave a legacy that says this person impacted others in a massive way, entrepreneurship is almost a required component of that, short of traditional philanthropy. It's almost a required component of that, so that you have the freedom to affect that change in society.
I completely agree. I'm gonna stir the pot a little bit here, because I have another belief, and I've talked about it on my show a few times. But my belief is that everybody should be the CEO of their own life, and definitely the CEO of their own life. If you're the breadwinner for your family, you're the CEO of your own family, and so forth. And as a business owner, I need employees, right? I can't just have a business unless I want a job, right? But it's hard to have a business without employees. So as much as I want everybody to be an entrepreneur, I also have to be okay with having people just okay with being an employee. But how do I help the people who are still employees and choose to be employees, which is fine, if that's what you choose to be employees, still treat their lives and their family and operate their employeeship as the CEO of their their life. And the reason I bring that up is a lot of people, they're unsatisfied with the conditions of work. They work too many hours. They don't get paid enough, all this stuff. And they blame, again, they play the victim. They choose victimhood out of creation. They blame their employer for all the crap. There's whole national campaigns of, we don't get enough time off work as men. We don't get enough time off work as women. Whatever, right? And
right.
Again, I'm here to stir the pot. Here's my belief. And it's not to be offensive to anybody. It's not to put anybody down or to say your opinion's invalid. But my belief is that if you're working in a position that you're unsatisfied with, it's your own dumb fault, right? It's your job as the CEO of your life or your family to negotiate the absolute best terms and terms that you're okay with in your life. And if you fail at that, it is not the other CEO's job to protect you. It's his job to do what's expedient for his company and his family, right? And so you have to understand that everybody's the CEO of their own life, and thus life is a negotiation. You want paid better? Go negotiate that. And if they say, no, I'm not paying you better, then if you're really the CEO, you're going to say, then I'm exiting this contract. Or if you stay in that contract, that's your own choice, and you better stop bitching about it because you chose it.
Well, that's the whole purpose of capitalism is that everyone is operating voluntarily. So if you charge too much for a service, people don't buy it. If your service is of low quality, people don't buy it, right? So it's all voluntary. And that's the whole point of this experiment called capitalism that we're in to begin with is the folks that are complaining about it now are trying to create involuntary measures within a voluntary system, right? To start putting requirements together, and it disrupts the entire apple cart. It makes the entire ripple effect within all of capitalism sort of reverberate through everything else in the economy. And look, I think if you're an adult, the life you have is the life you chose. And I don't want to be insensitive, but there isn't a country on this planet that provides you with more resources, more support, more levels of education, more levels of protection, more levels of safety. There isn't a country on this planet that provides higher levels of that. So if you're in a position that you're unhappy with now and you're an adult, now I'm not saying if you're a child that you're in that way, but if you're an adult, you're in a position you're unhappy with, you chose that position. Listen, in the book, part 2, chapters 5, 6, and 7 are all about accountability. And there's some hard truths in these sections about accountability because ultimately self-deception fools 100% of the people 100% of the time. And what we all look for is an opportunity to place blame outside of ourselves. This is attribution theory. I'm sure you're familiar with it. You know, we look for ways to blame everything around us so that we can still think highly of ourselves so it doesn't damage our self-perception. They were saying I don't have poor time management skills. The train made me late. Right? That wasn't my fault necessarily. So that's obviously a microcosm of what I'm saying. But the point is that everyone, there is never a moment, nor will there ever be a moment when you are without the power to change your destiny. Period. Full stop. So if you don't like where you are, change it. And if you don't change it, then you probably shouldn't be in line complaining about it.
Yeah, 100%. There's nothing more true than that statement in my mind. And the other reality from my experience anyways, is I've networked and been in the room and talked to people, even at the highest, what I would consider pretty high levels, very self-aware people who they stretch me because they're calling me on my self-aggrandizement or my attribution theory, right? They're calling me on that. But no matter how successful you become, you still do that to yourself. They all do it to themselves. It's just with different, bigger problems. And so hanging out with other people or building a mastermind, as Napoleon Hill would say, helps you stay in check because you, left to your own devices, are not going to stay in check.
Right. Of course not.
Even if you think you're really good at it, the very fact that you think, oh, I always do this, you're missing the mark. Like it just doesn't work.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, LeBron James has a coach, right? So I mean, the best athletes, the best thinkers in the world, they still learn from others and they still work with others. because sometimes you can be too close to something to see it objectively. And ultimately in this situation, if you measure your life against other people's lives, it's always going to create envy, because there'll always be somebody with a bigger house. There'll always be somebody with a more expensive car, no matter how much money you have. So the only way to avoid this feeling of resentment toward those around you is to measure yourself against your own abilities. Now, if you look at it and say, what am I capable of? Am I capable of more than I'm actually putting in right now? And if the answer to that is yes, then it doesn't create envy. It creates inspiration. It says, you know what? I have the ability to do this. And now that I really look at it, I could be doing a lot better if I just did X, Y, and Z. But everyone is very outwardly focused in comparing their lives. So right out of the book in chapter 1, we talk about environment and how our environment that we're born into is such a limiting factor in our perceptions of what opportunities lie in front of us or what we even want to become. So we live in this sort of fictional world that was created before we were born, and we're bound by its fictional boundaries and its fictional limits. We think, that I can't do this because I'm from here and I'm this kind of person. So therefore that doesn't fit within the narrative that I tell about myself. So much of this chapter 5, 6, and 7 on accountability, I think, are things that would resonate with what you're saying there, because ultimately the book is meant to empower people. And every person in America has the ability to achieve the things that they want to achieve if they can look inward instead of outward.
Yep. I 1000% agree. I love it. So I'm curious, how did you overcome, everybody has their own story when they finally decided, okay, I'm going off on my own. I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave. For you, I mean, you were how many years in the franchising world before you said, I'm going to go do something else?
Well, yeah, I had been an entrepreneur prior to really getting into the professional world. And I had attempted to franchise a concept myself, had no idea what I was doing. I did okay. I took a lot of lumps, and compared to, I think, what I would be able to do now, I would say I failed pretty miserably. I walked away with it not quite whole monetarily. So took some lumps, took some losses, learned a lot of lessons, and then parlayed that into a career in franchising because I wanted others to avoid making the mistakes that I had made. Spent a decade or so in the corporate world working with those entrepreneurs, and now had that call that you mentioned earlier, where I'm really driven to find out what I'm made of, and I can't find that out just by working within a position that someone else defines. So I was decided that I was going to take these lessons, write this book. Right now I'm working as a full-time speaker and writer, and I still do some consulting on the side. And the hardest thing for me in consulting is folks hire me to tell them what's a good idea. And then a lot of them never take my advice and often wonder why they hired me, because folks don't sometimes want to hear the truth. But that's my job, is sort of to tell them the truth, whether they take it or not, and take action on it. So I've taken my lumps, and these days I'm taking those lessons forward and hoping to prevent other people from making the same mistake.
Sure. So how did you overcome naysayers, or who was your biggest naysayer when you're making that transition, and how did you decide, I'm not going to listen to that, I'm going to keep going?
Yeah, so fortunately, when I first became an entrepreneur, I was 22 when I first started my first company. And I was young and dumb and thought I was bulletproof. And really, I was just completely oblivious to anyone who thought that my success wasn't inevitable. So I just didn't listen to those people because I was naively overconfident right at the time, which is kind of ironic. We talk about this in the book. Believe it or not, our optimism varies throughout life, and we are least optimistic in our mid-20s. So all the movies that talk about youth as being naively optimistic and having a rosy view of the world, it's actually the opposite of that. You're most optimistic when you're 55 years old. So, but think about it, Sam. This exacerbates the problem. Right when you're at the point where you're making significant life decisions, where you're going to work, where you're going to live, where you're going to spend your money, how you're going to save your money, is when you're most pessimistic. So what do? You look for certainty. You latch on to certainty because you're thinking, I'm just going to do because I know this is going to be there for me. And then 20 years later, you look back and go, God, I wish now that I know, right? Maybe I could have made some changes. And that's part of what I'm trying to affect here, is getting people to overcome that pessimism in their 20s so they don't get locked in and realize it when they're my age. I'm 46, about to be 47. And I was probably in my late 30s when I really started looking back and realizing that, yeah, I took some risk and I started some businesses here and there, but ultimately I did gravitate towards certainty. And then when I got a taste of it, I realized what a limiting factor it was for me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm curious, do you have children yourself?
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
So this next question, I don't ask it to everybody that I have on the show just because sometimes I feel like it's more relative. I'm going to get a better answer or not. I don't know.
Sure.
But I'm curious, from a financial perspective, what have you done over like raising your children to teach them about money? Like, how are you teaching them? Yes, there's certainty. You're not going to starve. You don't have to have like these negative relationship with money, but also you got to respect money. Money doesn't necessarily have to be traded for time, but you do need to earn your own money. Like, how do you go about that conversation with your kids? At what point did you start that conversation, and how did it evolve? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I think it's twofold. So I talk about this a little bit in part 3 of the book, and I'm not going to say that I'm a minimalist, but I will say that if I had every dollar that I wasted on things that I subsequently threw away within a year or so throughout my life, I would have millions of dollars, right? I have just bought a bunch of stuff. In retrospect, I'm like, I don't even know where that thing went. I bought it and it's just gone now. I moved, it went missing. So one of the things that we actively try to do at my home is before a purchase is made, that purchase is going to have a use, and that use is going to have to give me an ROI to tell me how it's either going to give us more time to focus on building our legacy, and we're obligated then to use that time accordingly, or help tell me how it's going to otherwise optimize our life in a way that we can increase the quality of the life that we have. So, we're very, very thoughtful before purchases come through. I'm of the opinion if your sink is leaking, you call a plumber. I'm not the guy who steps over dollars to pick up dimes. I love having things done correctly the first time. And I know a lot of people who try to save their way to profit within a business and in their own personal household. And you know what, that you end up living in an environment that's been sort of duct taped together because it was never done right the first time. And that costs you an enormous amount of time because you're maintaining the life you're living. You're not actually living. Mm-hmm. So the other piece of this, outside of almost a minimalist sort of perspective on purchases, is that everything has a cost, even things that don't have a price attached to them. And what we try to focus on in this house is the concept of time and the value of time, genuinely our only limited commodity. You can lose money, you can make money, right? You waste an hour, you can never get that hour back. Never. It's gone. So people talk about saving time, and I don't like that phrase because you can't. Time is either redirected or it's lost. It is never saved. You can't take it and use it tomorrow. It's not like rollover minutes back in the day with cell phones, right? You can't say, oh, well, I saved an hour today, so I'm going to use that hour tomorrow. No, you can't save time. You can only redirect it. So when you buy something that supposedly is going to make your life easier and it's going to save your time, ask yourself, what am I doing with that time that it saved me? Or am I just creating the same level of output with reduced levels of input by owning it?
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I think that, I've taught for a long time in my career that time is the only limited resource. You can make everything. I mean, we can make water at this point. We know the atomic
right.
structure of water. Like, we don't have to. Do we want clean water? Is it easier if God makes it for us? Sure is. But if we need to, we know how to atomically create water. I mean, it's like there's nothing really limited. And whether it's synthesized in a lab, which is not as good as if it's done by God, right? But you could create any type of food. We know the chemical structure, and we can get the minerals or the things and put them together and create it. There's nothing that we can't do from that respect. But it is important to recognize time is not there, and it's your biggest asset or liability, depending on how you choose to use or invest your time. It's
Yeah,
funny.
you're actually saying a quote directly from the book. I actually say that it can be an asset or a liability depending on how you choose to use it.
That's funny. I haven't read his book, but this is what I think. And I don't know where I learned it, but this is what I think. I also think that, again, my mind doesn't work in, especially in religious circles and conversations, people talk about sacrifice. They talk about it in business. Oh, you got to sacrifice this for this. And because just in the same conversation as time, there's not really a sacrifice. You make a judgment call about where you think whatever it is going to be better invested. Your time is going to be better invested. And that's what you choose. Now, you may end up thinking later on that you should have it would have been more advantageous, we'll say, to invest more time into your family than into your business, because now you have a bunch of money and a crappy family relationships. Or vice versa. Maybe you have a wonderful family, but you're living in the dirt and you're like, I should have maybe invested more time into building a business or some form of income. My family would have been okay with 20% less time. I think I could have managed the same relationship and still had a better lifestyle, right? So those are judgment calls and investments. In my mind, there's not sacrifices. You're not sacrificing anything. You made a judgment call. The idea of sacrifice, in my opinion, is to place yourself in a state of victimhood to circumstances, saying that, I'm a victim, that I can't have both things, so I must choose one and be victimized by loss of the other, rather than creation of saying, I am choosing what I feel is most important to me.
Absolutely. And that can change on a moment by moment basis. And I think that's one of the things that entrepreneurship gives you is the ability to say, for the next hour, I'm going to be focused on my computer or on my job or on my clients. But at 3:00 for my kids' recital, my phone will be turned off. And I don't think that's a freedom that is afforded to most people in traditional employment, because they're told what time to be there, how long to be there, where to sit, how to act, who they are supposed to talk to while they're there, how many days out of the month or out of the year that they cannot be there, right? So they're chained to that certainty in so many ways, and they're not afforded that opportunity to change it on a minute by minute basis. Whereas, you said this about entrepreneurship at the outset, that you gave up one boss for many bosses, and there's some truth to that. But you don't have those many bosses telling you all the same things that traditional employment is telling you. You do have that ability to pick and choose those moments and manage your time accordingly, so that both or neither are neglected.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I'm curious, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, first, if you read his book before you reach out to him, because there's a lot of the reason I say that is there's a lot of things that you might want to ask him, but they're answered in his book. So read his book and then ask some intelligent questions, clarifying questions about what he said in his book, or read his book, find out that you really want to work with him, and just call him and say, hey, how can I pay you to coach me, right? I don't know what your services are, but I know most people, if you pay them enough money, they'll share their knowledge with you, regardless if they were a coach beforehand.
Right. Yeah. I've got an excerpt of the book. I've got an excerpt of the book where folks can download right now and get on a wait list. It's supposed to be out this fall. So we're coming up on the opportunity for it to be early shipped to those who are on the wait list direct from the publisher. Because of COVID, it's probably not going to hit bookstores until December or January, but that doesn't mean you can't have it. It just means you can't walk into Barnes & Noble and buy it. But you can go to TreyWilliams.com, TRAWilliams.com, and I'm the third, so Trey's just a nickname. That's why it's spelled funny. But nonetheless, you can go to TreyWilliams.com, jump on that wait list, download an excerpt of the book, shoot me a note, look at some of the information that I have there about how I plan to use this, and hopefully rescue a million of those 100 million entrepreneurs out there who are stuck in traditional employment. Yeah,
that's awesome. And are you on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram? Where's the best place? Where are you most active?
Yeah, so on Facebook, I am Trey Williams, CFE. I'm a certified franchise executive designation through the International Franchise Association. So it's TRA Williams, CFE. And you can find me on Twitter at TRA_Williams. And I tend to use those two almost exclusively. I've got some great relationships on Twitter. And if you mute words appropriately on Twitter, it's a pretty useful app. And you really meet some interesting people. If you don't mute words appropriately, sometimes it can be frustrating.
Define mute words. I've never heard this term. I don't use Twitter because it's lost on me. I don't even know how to use it. It's just a confusing.
Yeah, so I like it because you can connect with some really smart people directly and learn from those people and vice versa. But you can go into Twitter and put a list of words that if a tweet includes those words, you don't want to see it. And it kind of eliminates this enormous amount of white noise negativity that's in our world right now. And you can really kind of hone in on some fun groups of people having good conversations there. Dr. Daniel Crosby wrote the foreword for my book. He's had 3 New York Times bestsellers. He's a behavioral finance expert. And he's got a fantastic group that you could engage with there. We often talk entrepreneurship and behavioral finance through Twitter with a lot of other smart folks as well. It makes for interesting conversation.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I love learning new things about technology because I feel like it's changing so rapidly all the time. Cool. So this is the next section here is called Legacy on Rapid Fire. It's 5 questions. I'm going to ask them as fast as possible. Not as fast as possible. I am looking for 1 word to 1 sentence answers. The first question, I want at least a sentence
all right.
of answer. Because some people are just like, oh, it's this. I'm like, okay, expound.
Right.
Learn. We're not just here to give a snippet or a quick answer. Okay. So Legacy on Rapid Fire starts now. What are you holding? What is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Commitment to the personal commitments that I've made to my family. I'm holding those as a priority, and I will make those next steps in my legacy, but not at the expense of time with my family.
Love it. I'm the same way. Optimization.
Yeah.
I could spend more time doing something, but that's not the solution. There's got to be
and they'll come. Those things will come eventually. But the time you have a family, you can never get back.
Amen. Amen. So, what's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
So the hardest thing I've ever accomplished was coming out of failure in 2006 and entering the workforce, and then having the temerity to leave it again, to try again. That was the hardest thing. And really, it wasn't difficult in as much as I almost looked forward to the opportunity to redeem myself.
Awesome. Love it. What's the greatest success up to this point in your life?
I think being a good son, brother, husband, father is my greatest success here, and everything else would come secondary to that. Professionally, I think my greatest success is that I have the opportunity to pay the lessons that I've learned forward to people so that they can avoid it.
I love it. So cool. I think that more people, I feel like there's a certain level of success where people are comfortable talking about their family, and like that, that's the most important. And then there's also a certain level of where people just aren't okay with talking about their family. It's weird.
Right.
Like, no, I'm all business. I'm all, like, hey, you got to be human at some point. So I love that. Thank you for sharing about your family. What do you think one of the biggest secrets that you believe contributes the most to your success? What's the biggest secret there?
I rarely have regret. I take lessons, move forward with them. I count them as something positive and keep them in my toolbox going forward so I can remember them.
Yeah, love it. And then what are some books? Obviously, your book will be on the shelves here in December or January, but what other books would you recommend to the Fuel Your Legacy audience?
So I think you need to read The Optimism Bias by Tali Sharot. You need to understand how we're hardwired for optimism. And I think you should read Sapiens by Yuval Harari and kind of understand how we got to where we are.
Yeah, I think that's only the second person who's ever recommended Sapiens. Good book, though, for sure. Love it. So this is a final question. It's my favorite question to ask. So hopefully you're ready for it because you did listen to some other episodes. But we got to pretend that you're dead, and now we're 6 generations from now. So we're sitting around a table. You're a bird in the sky. You're watching through the window, and you're listening to your 6th generation. So your great grandchildren sitting around the table discussing your life, talking about what your life meant to not just them but to the world. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy?
I want them to say that I allowed them to rise to their full potential, and the foundations that I laid, they built their successes on.
Love it. There you go, guys. And I would say that's 100% in alignment with what we've just heard from him over the last hour. is exactly that. He just is here. He's achieved his success, and he's here to believe in you and help you achieve yours, because that's what he's passionate about. Not because he needs more success or needs more money or needs to build himself up anymore, but because he cares about you and wants you to be able to feel and experience what he's been able to feel and experience through the liberty and freedom of being an entrepreneur. And I love it. Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That was perfect.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you guys so much. And please go check him out. Go download a portion of his book and then be ready for the full download, or to purchase your copy, have it pre-ordered or shipped to you, which is Boss Brain. What's the subtitle to that?
So it is Unlock Your Entrepreneurial Instincts and Live the Real American Dream.
Awesome. Cool deal. And we'll catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.